The marketplace was filled with noise, the kind of noise that was not happy, but cruel. Alien traders shouted, buyers laughed, and the sound of chains clinking made the air heavy. It was a place where hope came to die, and only money decided who would live and who would suffer. At the center of the market, a raised platform stood, a place where slaves were pushed into the light like broken things. Some were strong, some still young, others beaten until their spirits were gone. The crowd stared with greedy eyes, searching for tools, not lives. Among them stood a girl, small and fragile, her body covered with marks of pain. Her teeth were broken, her lips cracked, her eyes empty like dry wells. Her price was so low that even the auctioneer spoke with disgust. 2 credits, only 2, not worth more. The crowd roared with laughter, voices sharp like knives. Who would buy trash like that? They shouted. The girl lowered her head, shame burning inside her chest. She had stopped hoping long ago, but still, something inside her wished someone would see her as more than garbage. But in this place, mercy was as rare as water in the desert. The auctioneer pulled her forward, his hand rough on her thin arm. Look at this one, he barked. She will not last long, her body is weak, but maybe someone can use her for small tasks. A kitchen slave, a servant who doesn't complain. More laughter followed, cruel and heartless. One alien spat on the ground. Not even worth feeding, another jeered. The girl flinched, but she did not cry. Her tears had dried years ago. In the crowd, most turned their heads away, not out of pity but boredom. She was not strong, not beautiful, not young enough to be desired. To them, she was nothing but broken goods, forgotten before she was even sold. But then, in the far corner of the marketplace, someone watched quietly. A human man stood there, silent among the noise. He was not rich, not dressed in fine clothes, just simple worn garments. His eyes, however, were sharp, steady, and unlike the others. They did not hold cruelty. He saw the girl, trembling on the platform, her thin shoulders shaking as the crowd mocked. He noticed how she kept her head down, not out of obedience but out of shame and fear. Something inside him stirred, something that made him stay when others had already turned away. The auctioneer grew angry. Come now, nobody. 2 credits. Just 2, he shouted, but no hands were raised. The girl stood frozen, waiting for the whip, waiting for punishment because nobody wanted her. It had happened before. Slaves unsold were often beaten harder, until someone bought them out of pity or for cruelty. Her heart pounded, she braced herself. She thought this was the end of her road, but then a voice broke through the laughter. Firm and clear, I'll take her, the human said. The crowd fell silent for a moment, then exploded with shock. Is he mad? One alien hissed, a human buying garbage? Another sneered. They laughed louder, pointing at the man as if he was a fool. The girl lifted her head slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. Had she heard right? Someone wanted her? No, it couldn't be. It must be a trick, she thought. But the human stepped forward, his walk steady. He pulled out 2 worn coins and dropped them onto the wooden table before the auctioneer. The metallic sound echoed, louder than all the laughter around. The auctioneer blinked, confused, then shrugged. Fine, take her. She is yours, he spat. He shoved the girl toward the man, almost throwing her at his feet. The crowd jeered, mocking both of them. A slave worth 2 coins and a master worth nothing more. But the human ignored them, his eyes fixed only on her. The girl trembled, fear rising inside her. She thought he would chain her, hit her, or drag her away like the others had done. But instead he bent down slightly, his voice calm, almost gentle. You're safe now, he whispered. Her heart stopped for a moment. Safe? She did not even remember what that word meant. Nobody had ever spoken it to her, not once in her life. The human reached out his hand, slow, not forcing, not pulling, just waiting. The girl stared, unable to move, her breath shallow. The crowd continued laughing, calling the man insane. But in that noise, in that moment, something impossible began for the first time. She felt that maybe, just maybe, her life would not end in chains. The auction nobody cared for had just changed her fate. The marketplace did not forget quickly. Whispers followed the human as he led the girl away. Every step felt heavy, not because of chains, but because of the stares, the laughter, and the mocking voices that filled the air. The girl's heart raced, her thin hands trembling at her sides. She could not understand why a stranger would buy her, why he would waste even 2 coins. To her, kindness was a trick, always hiding something sharp behind a smile. She had seen masters promise food only to take it back. She had seen buyers speak sweet words before throwing their slaves into pits, so when this man said, "You're safe now," she did not believe it. How could she? The human walked quietly, his head low, his shoulders strong but weary. He did not drag her. He did not pull her by the arm. He only walked and allowed her to follow. The girl kept her distance, each step filled with dread. She thought maybe he was waiting. Maybe once they reached a hidden place, the real cruelty would begin. The crowd's voices still echoed in her ears. Trash, worthless, broken, they had said. She could still hear their laughter chasing her into the narrow streets beyond the auction yard. Her chest tightened, shame and fear mixed like poison. But then she looked at him, the man who had chosen her. His face was calm, his eyes unreadable. He did not smile, but he did not scowl either. There was no hunger in his gaze, no cruelty, only something she could not name. They walked past small shops, through alleys where other slaves worked under harsh orders. Some masters glared, others smirked at the human as if mocking him. The girl lowered her head again, afraid of the attention. She wished the ground would swallow her whole. Finally, they reached the edge of the village, where houses grew fewer and the noise faded. A small path led to a lonely hut, its roof patched, its walls worn but standing strong. The human stopped, then looked at her, his voice steady. "This is home," he said simply. Her body tensed. The word struck her like a knife. Home, she thought. She had no home for her. Home had been cages, cold floors, and dark corners where she was forgotten. She shook her head slightly, not daring to believe. But he opened the door and stepped aside, waiting for her to enter first. She hesitated, her heart pounding. Every instinct told her to run, though her broken body could not carry her far, but his eyes. They were not like the others. There was no rush, no threat, only patience. Slowly, carefully, she stepped inside. The air smelled different, warm with the faint scent of bread and smoke. A small fire burned in the corner, not large, but enough to chase away the cold. A wooden table sat at the center with a single chair. On the table was food, bread, a bowl of soup, and water. Her stomach twisted painfully at the sight, hunger biting like fire inside her, but she dared not touch it. The human walked to the table, pulled out the chair, and gestured for her to sit. Her knees trembled. She shook her head again, whispering, "No, master." Her voice cracked, almost lost. The human's brow furrowed, his voice soft but firm. "I am not your master," he said. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever said that to her before, not once. He pushed the bread gently toward her. "Eat," he said, nothing more. Her hands shook violently. She thought of poison, of tricks, of hidden punishments. But the smell of the bread was too strong, too real. Her hunger defeated her fear. She tore a piece and brought it to her lips. It was warm, soft, and unlike anything she had eaten in years. Tears welled in her eyes. Though she did not want them to, she ate slowly, every bite burning with confusion. The human sat across from her, saying nothing, only watching. Not with greed, not with cruelty, but with quiet understanding when she finished. He poured water into a small cup and slid it across. She drank, each swallow easing the fire in her chest. For a moment silence filled the room. Only the crackle of fire and the sound of her breathing remained. She could not understand why this man had chosen her. She had no beauty, no strength, no worth. Yet here she was, fed, warm, and alive. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why? Me?" The human leaned back, his eyes meeting hers. "Because no one else would," he said simply. His words struck deeper than chains ever had. She lowered her gaze, tears falling freely now. Nobody had ever wanted her. Nobody had ever seen her as more than trash. And yet this lonely human, with nothing to gain, had chosen her. That night the girl lay on a bed for the first time. It was small, the blanket thin, but it was hers. She curled up, still waiting for pain, still fearing betrayal, but none came. She closed her eyes, her body trembling not from fear now, but from something unfamiliar, hope. The marketplace had laughed, the crowd had mocked, but the human's choice had changed everything. The $2 slave that no one wanted had finally been chosen, and in her heart a fragile seed began to grow. A seed she never thought she would feel again. The seed of belonging. The night was long, and the girl slept with one eye half open, her body curled tightly under the thin blanket, her ears listening for footsteps, for chains, for the sound of a whip. But all she heard was the soft crackle of the fire and the slow breathing of the human who slept nearby. No one shouted at her. No one struck her. No one dragged her away. It was the first night in years when pain did not wake her. Morning came quietly, sunlight slipping through the cracks in the wooden walls. The girl opened her eyes slowly, expecting to see guards, expecting to see iron bars. Instead, she saw the human stirring the fire, his movements calm and steady. The smell of warm bread filled the air, and it made her stomach twist again with hunger. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. Confused, afraid this dream would soon end, the human turned to her and said, "Eat." With the same steady tone as before, he placed bread on the table. Along with a small cup of water, she hesitated, staring at it as though it might vanish. Her hands shook as she reached, the memory of starvation too strong to ignore. She ate quietly, every bite making her chest ache with emotion. But even as she ate, fear coiled inside her. What did he want from her? Why would he feed her when others only bought her to suffer? Her eyes darted toward the door, wondering if she should run, but her legs were weak, her body broken, and where would she go? After breakfast, the human spoke again, his voice calm. "We need to go," he said. "The market is not safe. There are eyes everywhere." Her breath caught, panic flashing in her chest. Go? Where would he take her? To another cage? To a cruel master? She lowered her gaze, clutching the blanket as if it could protect her. The human packed a small bag, placing food and a flask of water inside. Then he stood by the door waiting for her. Not ordering, not pulling. Only waiting. For a long moment she sat frozen, her mind filled with dark memories. But something in his stillness pushed her to rise. Her steps were small, hesitant, but she followed. Outside, the world felt heavy. The streets were filled with whispers and stares. People pointed, their voices cruel. "That's the $2 slave, worthless," others laughed. Mocking the human. "He bought trash, how pathetic." The girl lowered her head, her cheeks burning with shame. Every whisper cut deeper than a blade. But the human kept walking, his back straight, his steps firm. He did not reply, he did not slow. He only walked forward, as if their laughter could not touch him. The girl clung to his shadow, afraid of being seen, afraid of being left behind. They passed through the village and into the open road. The noise of the market faded, replaced by the quiet of wind and dust. The land stretched wide, barren fields with broken fences and old trees that clawed at the sky. The girl's breath grew heavy, every step painful, her thin body struggling to keep up. But the human slowed his pace, never leaving her behind. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher and her legs shook with weakness. Finally she stumbled, falling to her knees. Her chest heaved as she gasped for air. She expected anger, a strike, a cruel hand forcing her to rise. But instead the human knelt beside her. He opened the flask and held it out. "Drink," he said. She stared wide-eyed, unable to believe. When she hesitated, he pressed it gently into her hands. Her lips touched the water, cool and fresh. Tears blurred her vision as she drank. They rested under a crooked tree, its branches offering little shade. The human broke bread in half and gave her a piece, keeping the smaller half for himself. She ate slowly, her eyes watching him with confusion. Why would he share with her? Why not take it all? Her voice shook as she whispered, "Why? Why do you care?" He looked at her, silent for a long moment, then he said, "Because no one else does." The words struck her like lightning, her chest tightened. Her broken heart struggling to believe, she turned away, afraid he might see her tears in her life. Care had always been an illusion, but now, sitting under this tree, she felt something different, something small, fragile, but real. When they rose again, the path grew rough. The road twisted into hills and stones cut at her feet. She winced with every step, but still she walked. The human stayed near, steady and silent. He did not shout when she slowed. He did not hit her when she stumbled. Instead, he lifted her arm gently, supporting her weight when she thought she would fall. The journey stretched long into the afternoon. The sky turned orange, and the wind carried dust that stung their eyes. The girl's body ached, but her fear was slowly changing. It did not vanish, but it shifted, mixed with confusion, mixed with a fragile hope she could not name. As night fell, they reached a small rise overlooking a valley. Down below, she saw faint lights from distant farms. The human set his bag down and built a small fire. The girl sat close, her arms hugging her knees, her eyes fixed on the flames. The warmth touched her skin, easing the cold. For the first time, she allowed herself to lean slightly toward him. Not away. She still feared him, still doubted his reason. But deep inside, she began to wonder, Maybe his choice was not madness, maybe it was something else. And though the road ahead was uncertain, for the first time in her life she did not feel completely alone. The night air was cool and the fire crackled softly. The girl sat near the flames, her knees drawn to her chest, her eyes flicking nervously between the human and the dark around them. She was used to nights filled with fear, nights where footsteps meant pain, nights where even sleep was a trap. But here, under the open sky, all she heard was the gentle wind and the steady crack of burning wood. Still, her heart would not rest because fear did not leave so easily. The human placed a small pot above the fire, filling it with water and a handful of dried roots and herbs from his bag. The smell rose slowly, warm and earthy, something her empty stomach recognized before her mind allowed it. She licked her cracked lips but quickly lowered her head. Ashamed of her hunger, slaves were not supposed to show desire for food. Food was given as control, not as kindness. She braced herself for the cruel words that usually came. But none arrived. Instead, the human stirred the pot quietly, his eyes on the flame, not on her. Minutes stretched into silence, broken only by the sound of boiling. When the soup was ready, he poured it carefully into a small wooden bowl. He placed it on the ground before her, sliding it gently across the dirt. Her eyes widened, her breath caught, food given freely. Her hands trembled, she did not move. Her mind screamed of tricks, of punishments, of cruel laughter waiting once she touched it. She shook her head, whispering in a broken voice, "No, not for me." But the human's reply was calm and firm. "Eat." That one word carried no anger, no command, only quiet insistence. Slowly she reached, her fingers brushing the warm bowl. Her chest tightened, and for a moment she froze. Afraid, then hunger won, she lifted the bowl to her lips. The first sip burned her tongue slightly, but the taste was gentle, rich, and soft. Her eyes filled with tears, her body shaking as she swallowed. It was the first real meal she had tasted in years. She ate in silence, spoonful by spoonful, her tears falling into the soup. The human said nothing. He only watched with steady eyes. Not the eyes of a master, not the eyes of a buyer, but the eyes of someone who wanted her to live. She finished quickly, embarrassed by her own hunger, but too weak to stop. When the bowl was empty, she held it close, almost afraid it would be taken away. The human broke a piece of bread in half and gave her the larger part. She stared at it, stunned. No one had ever given her more, not once. Masters always took the best for themselves. But here he was, keeping the smaller half, offering her the larger as if she mattered. Her lips quivered, her voice barely a whisper. Why do you give me this?" He answered simply, "Because you need it more." The words hit her heart like thunder. Her throat closed and she bowed her head. Unable to look at him, tears spilled freely, not from pain, but from something deeper, something she did not understand. She ate slowly this time, each bite filling her empty body, each bite planting a fragile seed of trust. When the food was gone, the human set aside the pot and leaned back against a rock. He did not order her to clean. He did not order her to serve. Instead, he spoke softly, "Rest. Tomorrow will be hard." Her body stiffened, waiting for the usual harsh tone, but his words carried no cruelty, only care. She nodded slightly, though her heart still struggled to believe. The girl lay near the fire, the blanket pulled around her shoulders. She felt the warmth on her skin, the gentle crackle filling her ears. Her eyes drifted toward the human, who sat quietly, his gaze lost in the flames. He looked lonely, tired, as though he carried a weight heavier than anyone could see. For a moment she forgot her fear, and a thought came uninvited. Maybe he was as broken as she was. She turned away quickly, hugging herself tighter, but in the quiet, her heart beat softer, calmer than before. The taste of soup still lingered on her tongue, the bread still heavy in her stomach. For the first time in years she was full, not chained, not punished, not mocked, but fed. Her eyes closed slowly, though fear still lingered at the edges. She expected nightmares, the same ones that always came. But instead her dreams were quieter, filled not with whips or cages, but with the warmth of firelight. She woke once in the night, startled by silence. The human was still awake, keeping watch, his eyes scanning the dark. He looked at her briefly, then back at the night. Not once did he move toward her. Not once did he raise his voice. The girl lay back down, her body trembling less than before. The world was still cruel, the road ahead still uncertain. But tonight one thing had changed. She had eaten a meal not given as punishment, But as care she had been treated not like property, but like a person. And deep inside a fragile truth began to whisper. Perhaps this human had not bought her to own her. Perhaps he had bought her to save her. The village was never kind to outsiders and even less kind to weakness. When the human returned with the girl at his side, whispers began before they even reached the main street. Eyes turned sharp and mocking, voices rising like a swarm of insects. "That is the 2-coin slave," someone hissed. "Worthless trash, and he brought her home," another sneered. The girl kept her head low, her body trembling as if every stare carried the weight of chains. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the ground. Her broken teeth hid behind her lips as she pressed them tightly together. Every laugh cut her deeper than the whips ever had. She thought the human would grow angry at her shame. But instead he walked calmly forward, ignoring them all. The streets filled with children pointing, elders shaking their heads. "Humans are fools," one alien muttered. He wasted his money, even if it was just 2 coins. Another spat on the ground as they passed. Better to let the dogs eat her than waste food on her. The girl flinched at the words. Her shoulders curling tighter, her eyes burned, but she did not cry. Because tears would only bring more laughter. At the edge of the crowd, a merchant called out, "Hey human, you want to trade? I'll give you half a loaf of bread for her. At least the dogs will stop barking at night." Laughter followed. Cruel and loud. The girl's chest tightened. Her legs almost giving way, she braced herself, waiting for him to agree to hand her over and end this mockery. But the human's voice cut through the noise. Steady and cold. "She is not for trade," he said. The laughter stumbled, confusion spreading. Not for trade? Nobody said that about slaves. The girl's eyes lifted slightly but quickly dropped again. She could not believe he had defended her. Not in front of them all, her heart pounded. Her fear twisting into something strange, something fragile. They reached the small house at the edge of the village. The human opened the door and gestured for her to go inside. She obeyed quickly, slipping past him, desperate to escape the cruel eyes of the crowd. Inside the air was quiet, but her heart was loud. She sank onto the floor, pressing her face into her hands, her body shaking. The voices still echoed in her mind. "Worthless trash. Broken," she whispered to herself. "Why keep me? They hate you. I will bring you only trouble." The human set down the bag and crouched beside her. His voice was calm but firm. "Their hate is theirs. Not ours," she shook her head. Tears falling now. "You should send me away. They will mock you, they will hurt you, all because of me." His reply was steady, carrying a weight she could not ignore. "I did not choose you for them. I chose you for me." She stared at him. Stunned, her lips parted, but no words came. He rose and began preparing the small fire as though the matter was closed. But in her heart, his words struck like fire. He had chosen her not because of pity, not because of others, but because he wanted to. Days passed, but the world's cruel eyes did not look away. Every time they went into the village for food or water, whispers followed, some pointed, some laughed. Others grew hostile. "Slaves are tools," one said. "If he does not use her, then he is weak." Rumors spread quickly, twisting into sharper blades. "The human sleeps with trash," someone said behind them one day. Laughter exploded and the girl froze, her face burning. But the human kept walking, his back unbent. The girl glanced at him, searching for anger, but found only calm silence. At night she sat by the fire, hugging herself tightly. Her voice broke as she whispered, "They hate me, they hate you, why do you not send me away?" The human looked at her across the flames, his eyes steady. "Family is not about price," he said. "Family is about choice." She shook her head in disbelief. "But I am not your blood, I am nothing." His reply came without hesitation. "You are not nothing, not to me." Her heart ached at the words, as if the chains inside her chest cracked one by one. Nobody had ever called her something more than property. Nobody had ever said she mattered. She lay awake that night, her mind racing. The cruel eyes of the village burned in her thoughts. But his words shone brighter. For the first time, she wondered if maybe she was worth something. But peace was fragile and cruelty never rested one evening. As the sun bled red over the horizon, heavy footsteps approached their door. The human rose, his jaw tightening. The girl shrank back, fear flooding her veins. Through the small window she saw dark figures gathering, their eyes sharp, their voices harsh. They were not villagers come to mock. They were men come to take. The knock was not a knock at all, but a heavy fist pounding against the wood. The air turned cold, the fire flickered low. The girl's breath came fast, her body curling tighter. "They will take me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They will take me back." The human stood still, his eyes on the door, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a promise. "No one takes you from me." The pounding on the door grew louder, echoing through the small wooden house. The girl pressed herself against the wall, her body shaking as fear rushed back into her veins. She knew those knocks, heavy and cruel. They belonged to men who saw slaves as nothing more than property. Her heart screamed that she would be dragged away, beaten, chained, and sold again. Her broken teeth clenched as tears filled her eyes. The human stood at the door, his back straight, his shoulders firm. He did not open it immediately, he did not rush. Instead, he looked at her, his eyes steady as if asking her to trust him. But she could not yet. Fear was too strong. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "They have come for me. They will take me back." His reply was calm but unshakable. "Not while I stand." The door shook under another blow. "Open up, human." A harsh voice barked, "You hold property that does not belong to you." Another shouted, "Give her back or we will take her by force." The girl's chest tightened, her breath fast and shallow. She knew how this would end. One man against many could not win. She pressed her hands over her ears, waiting for the crash, waiting for pain. But the human stepped forward and pulled the door open. 3 men stood outside, tall, broad, their faces twisted with greed and cruelty. Behind them, the villagers watched from the shadows, whispering, eager for a fight. The leader sneered, pointing at the girl inside. "That slave is not yours, she was marked for another. Hand her over." The human's voice was firm, low and steady. "She is mine now." The men laughed, cruel and mocking. "Yours? For 2 coins?" One spat. "She is broken, worthless, why risk your life for trash?" Another growled. The human did not move. His eyes locked on them. "She is under my roof, she eats my bread." "No one touches her," he said. The crowd gasped, whispers spreading quickly. No one had ever spoken like that for a slave. No one had dared. The girl's heart pounded in her chest, her eyes wide with disbelief. He stood between her and danger, as if her life had value. But fear crushed her hope. She whispered, "Please let me go, they will kill you." "I'm not worth it." The human turned his head slightly, his gaze meeting hers, his voice softened. "You are worth more than they will ever know." The men grew angry, their faces red, their hands reaching for weapons. Rusty blades glinted in the fading light. The villagers backed away, some murmuring, some smirking. Waiting for blood, the leader stepped closer, his voice a growl. "Step aside, human, or we will cut you down." The human's hand tightened into a fist, his stance solid. "I will not step aside," he said. The girl clutched the blanket around her shoulders, her body trembling violently. She wanted to run, to hide, to vanish into the dark, but her legs would not move, her breath would not steady. She had never seen anyone fight for her, not once. Masters had sold her, traders had mocked her, crowds had laughed. But this man, this lonely human, stood like a wall between her and the storm. The first man lunged forward, blade raised. The human caught his arm, twisting hard, the blade clattering to the ground. The crowd gasped, the sound sharp against the night. The man cried out, stumbling back, clutching his wrist. Another rushed in, swinging wide. The human dodged, his fist striking the attacker's jaw, sending him crashing into the dirt. The third man hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes, but pride pushed him forward, and he charged. The human met him head-on, his shoulder slamming into the man's chest, driving him backward. The fight was brutal, quick and raw. The human bled from a cut across his arm, but he did not fall. He fought not for glory, not for pride, but for her. Every strike, every move was a shield between her and the men who wanted to drag her away. The villagers watched in stunned silence. The laughter gone, whispers turned to shock, some even to respect when the last man stumbled to the ground. Groaning, beaten, the human stood tall, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His arm dripped blood, his face bruised, but his eyes burned with fire. He looked at the men and spoke through clenched teeth. "She stays, she is mine, and if you come again, you will not leave." The defeated men scrambled to their feet, cursing, limping away into the night. The villagers parted silently, their cruel eyes lowered, none daring to mock now. Inside the house, the girl sat frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her heart felt like it would break from the weight of what she had seen. She whispered, voice shaking, Why would you do this for me? The human entered, blood on his hands, but his gaze gentle as it fell on her. His voice was quiet, almost tender. Because you are family now. The words hit her harder than any blow. Her chest shook, her breath caught family, a word she had never owned, a word she thought belonged only to others. She fell to her knees, her tears wetting the floor. For the first time, she did not feel like trash. She did not feel like a slave. For the first time, she felt chosen, protected, and seen. The night outside was filled with silence, the villagers whispering in awe. The girl clutched the blanket, her broken heart stitching piece by piece. The human sat across from her, bloodied but unbroken, and she realized that no chain, no crowd, no cruel man could undo what had just been done. The test of loyalty was over, and he had chosen her without fear, and deep inside, something powerful took root, trust. The house was quiet after the fight. The fire burned low, casting long shadows against the walls. The girl sat near the corner, her hands gripping the blanket tightly, her heart still racing. The image of the human standing against 3 men burned in her mind. He had bled for her, fought for her, and refused to give her away. It felt unreal, like a dream she did not deserve. The human sat by the fire, wrapping cloth around the cut on his arm. His face was calm, though his body carried pain. He worked silently, not complaining, not showing weakness. The girl wanted to speak, but words caught in her throat. She had never thanked anyone, never been allowed to. Her lips trembled before the whisper escaped. Why did you fight for me? He lifted his gaze, his eyes steady as always. His voice was low, but every word struck deep. Because no one else would, he said. And because you are not theirs. You are mine now, not as property, but as family. The girl froze, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. Family. The word echoed in her chest like a bell. She had never known its meaning, never dared to dream of it. But now this man, this lonely human, had given it to her. Tears welled in her eyes. Heavy and unstoppable, she pressed her broken teeth into her lip, ashamed of her sobs, but the human did not laugh. He did not scold, he only leaned back, his tired voice softer. You do not have to be afraid here. Not anymore. That night she lay on the bed again, the blanket warm around her small body. Her eyes stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying everything. The crowd's cruel laughter, the heavy fists on the door, the clash of fists and blades, and then his voice steady and unshaken. Calling her family, she wept quietly into the pillow. Not from pain, but from something new for the first time. She felt she belonged to something greater than chains. The days that followed were not easy. The village still whispered, some mocked, some glared. But when they saw the human walking beside her, none dared to touch. His presence was a shield stronger than any chain. He worked in the fields, gathering food, fixing tools. His hands rough but steady, and she helped in small ways, carrying water, cooking simple meals. At first she feared mistakes, flinching at every slip, expecting anger. But he never raised his hand, never raised his voice. Instead, he only said, "It's all right, try again." Each day her fear loosened. Little by little she spoke more, her voice timid but growing stronger. She asked questions, learned his ways, and even laughed once. The sound startled her. She had forgotten what laughter felt like. The human looked at her then, a small smile breaking his tired face, and she knew, even broken, even unwanted, she was safe here. But safety was not the only thing she found. She began to feel something deeper, something she never thought possible: belonging. The word slave no longer defined her. The word trash no longer chained her. In her heart, a new name formed: daughter. She whispered it to herself at night, tasting it like a forbidden fruit, and each time her tears fell softer, sweeter. One evening, as the sun set in golden red, she sat by the fire with him. The silence stretched, but it was not heavy. It was gentle. Her voice trembled as she finally spoke the word aloud. "Father," she whispered. The human turned slowly, his eyes wide with surprise. Her face burned with shame. She wished she could take it back. But before she could, his voice broke the silence. "Yes," he said softly. "Daughter." Her heart shattered and healed at the same time. The word wrapped around her like the warmest blanket. No auction, no chain, no cruel laugh could ever take it away now. She was not the 2-coin slave anymore. She was not the broken girl with missing teeth. She was family, chosen, defended, and loved. From that day forward, the village looked at them differently. Some still mocked, some still whispered, but many lowered their eyes, unable to deny the strength of the bond they saw. The girl walked with her head a little higher, not proud but no longer crushed. Every step beside the human felt like a step out of darkness. Years would pass and stories would spread. Stories of a lonely human who bought a broken slave no one wanted. Stories of how he called her daughter and fought to keep her safe. Some laughed, some cursed, but others whispered in awe, because in a world ruled by cruelty, kindness was the rarest power. And in the small house on the edge of the village, two lives healed together. Not master and slave, not property and owner, but father and daughter bound by choice, not by chains. Their story became a quiet flame in a dark world, a reminder that even a $2 life broken and beaten could be priceless when given love. The girl, once unwanted, now had a name, a home, and a family, and the human, once lonely, no longer walked alone together. They were proof that blood does not make family. Loyalty does, love does, choice does, and that bond, forged in fire and defended with blood, could never be broken.